Hello, everybody. Once again, this is Fred Wanko coming to you from our studios in Chicago with another edition of Bold Talk on Island TV. As usual, I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, depending on where you are around the world. Today, my spirit is slightly dampened, but I'm about to lift it even beyond where it ever was. Because the video we posted last night, which is more or less the video I'm gonna be reposting with a little tweaking here and there, was YouTube restricted because they said that some of the content is not advertiser friendly. Well, we didn't post anything out of the ordinary. What it is that some of the graphics we used was very, very graphically explicit, depicting what black slaves went through in America, and probably advertisers don't want us to show those kind of truth. The things I'm gonna edit out of the video are things that I'm guessing is the reason why they said it's not advertiser friendly. Hopefully that's all they were restricting. But this time, if they restrict it again, I'm not going to remove the video, edit and reload. I'm just gonna let it run without advertising. Because the reality is that my mission on Bold Talk is not the advertising revenue. The advertising revenue helps. My mission is to boldly present things I feel that if they are fixed, can make the world a better place. Make the relationships between Africa and the rest of the world, especially America, Britain, France, most of the EU countries, and whoever else takes Africa for granted. That's all I'm trying to do. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that America and France and Britain and many of those in the EU countries don't give a damn about Africa. They are very, very concerned and interested in what Africa provides them to beautify their countries, but they don't give a damn if Africa suffers while they take all the resources. And all I'm trying to say is, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. When Israel sneezes, it seems like America wants the world to come to a stop until Israel's problems are solved. I'm not anti-Israel. As a matter of fact, I sympathize with what Israel goes through. But God knows what African countries have been going through in the last 10 years, in the last 5 years, in the last few months. God knows what Nigerians and Nigerians and Cameroonians and Sudanese and people from Mali and all those places, God knows what they've been going through over the last 5 years. And all America and France and Britain and many in the EU countries are interested in is continue to exploit the continent, continue to extract from the continent what helps their economies, continue to negotiate with powerless puppets in Africa to bring in their military bases at the tip of every corner of Africa, so that they more or less have guns to our head to let us take out of Africa what they are taking out unfairly. This commentator is not advocating that Africa should not let America or Britain or France or any of them benefit from the resources we have. All I'm saying is that if these resources are so good to the world and so good to America and Britain and France and all of them, let's sit down at a table and see how America and Britain and France and all of them can get what they want, but also make sure that Africa gets what it needs to develop Africa, so that Africa can look like the rest of the developed world, but also help us do what it takes in Africa to make sure, stop sabotaging us by planting puppets that work for America and for Britain and for France to be the ones leading African countries and making policies that don't benefit the masses of Africans, but only benefits the puppet masters and the puppets. It's time for these things to change. I'm going to borrow from the words, probably to motivate us, from the words of an African American and what he thinks is wrong with Africa. He presents Africans as people who are parading themselves around the world as international beggars, when in reality, Africa and Africans are the ones who created civilization. That's deep. And that's not a criticism, even though it's critical. That's a compliment. And somebody who is saying to his brothers and sisters in Africa, wake up and search yourselves. He continued to say, why don't you call on the children of Africa to come back home and help build Africa? It's not too much to ask. I want you to listen to him say some of the things I just paraphrased. Just listen. But before you listen to him, let me play you a melodious soundbite that perfectly crystallizes the message that this African American is delivering to Africans about the beauty of this faraway land called Africa.
There is a beautiful home in a faraway land where the saints of God are gathering. Hear the sweet melodies they are singing unto the Lord. Oh, they are giving him praises forevermore. Alan Kemarama, Ebeti Aya, Ebendi Sobi, Alewuti, Noro Aputo, Anabukuru Juku, Aneye Aekele, Rebi Ebi, Yo Koko, Yo Koko, Yo Koko, Yo Koko, Yo Koko, Koko, Yo Koko, Yo Koko, Yo Koko.
None of you can deny that what I'm saying is the truth. You know it's the truth. But either you won't write it, or you're too cowardly to speak it, because you want some favor here or favor there. So because you can't talk, you are muzzled. I'm not. I'm a free black man. And I didn't come here looking for a handout. And I really don't think you need one. Your problem is that you think you need a handout. Everything you need is right under your foot, but you looking everywhere else for help instead of to yourself and what you can produce for yourself. This is Africa's dilemma. You are parading yourself before the world as international beggars when you gave civilization to the world. Your problem is not America. Your problem is not Israel. Your problem is not Britain. Your problem is your disunity and your dependence on others to do for you what you could do for yourself. So I don't have to come back here anymore to help you. The help is already here. The knowledge is already here. The land is here. The sun is here. The water is here. The minerals are here. You have some of the finest minds in the world, but they're in Europe and they're in America making money while Africa suffers. Why don't we create politically stable environment and call the children of Africa back home to help build Africa? We are your children. And we will come and help. But don't expect us to come with billions of dollars when we don't have it. We're struggling in America. But you got it all right here under your foot. And you should be ashamed not to look to yourself, begging white folk to give you what you could give yourself. What I said today, which one of these countries is going to give you $20 million? America's not going to give you $20 million. You got it right here, but your disunity won't allow you to pool it. It's your fault, and you got to accept that responsibility. That is why my message is atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility. We got to stop blaming everything on somebody else and see what is our responsibility.
Folks, it couldn't be said more succinctly. We should be, as Africans, we should be ashamed of ourselves, begging white folks to give to us what we can give to ourselves. Having crude oil in our countries and no refineries to refine the crude oil. On that note, let me introduce an African here talking to Africans about why they really have no business depending on America or EU or France or anybody, because those are the people responsible for our plight today. They don't like us. When are we going to realize that and then move on as capable people who can do for ourselves?
Led by the United States. They have come to Southern Africa to teach us democracy. A country that was opposed to our liberation, a country that supported colonial regimes, the apartheid regime in South Africa, the white racist minority regime in Zimbabwe, today is coming to Africa to teach us about democracy. A country that has toppled so many governments in Africa, that has led so many coups in Africa and other parts of the world, a country that has killed so many of our leaders in Africa and other parts of the world. The killers of Patrice Lumumba, those who toppled Kwame Nkrumah, those who killed Nasser, those who killed Muammar Gaddafi, today are coming to teach us about democracy. A country that has been built on brutal force, on enslavement of other human beings, on the humiliation of Africans, the exploitation of Africans, the plunder of Africa, today is coming to teach us about democracy.
Yes, exactly what the man is saying. For some reason, as a people, as a continent, we are fascinated by the white skin. Listen to this British guy, Galloway. Listen to what he says about America going to South Africa, again, directly or indirectly, to teach them about democracy, democracy that benefits America but not Africans. Just listen.
I've only got time to turn to the funniest story of the week. Joe Biden is currently holding a democracy summit in southern Africa. That's right, in the very place where the United States and the United Kingdom and France and all the other so-called West supported racist, apartheid, white supremacist states right up until the very end. Margaret Thatcher, I was there, saw her lips move, called Nelson Mandela a common terrorist. The United States took Mandela off the terrorist list in 2008, in the 18th year of his presidency of the Republic of South Africa. And I got to thinking when I saw a very harrowing picture posted by one of my friends on Twitter earlier this evening. It's a picture that deserves to be seen far more widely. You'll find it on my Twitter feed. It's a picture of the Congo's first Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, half naked, in shackles, being pushed down aircraft steps by a Belgian military officer after his overthrow in a coup organized and executed by Britain, Belgium, and the United States of America. The newly elected President Jack Kennedy knew nothing of this coup, and the CIA defied him, lied to him, and conducted this coup behind their new president's back. But it happened. The CIA, MI6, and the hated Belgian colonist government that was finally having to leave power took this fine man, probably the greatest of all African leaders, and murdered him. They then dismembered him. They then dissolved him in acid and sent one of his teeth back to Brussels for safekeeping, for DNA. It was only returned to the Congo last year. The West murdered Patrice Lumumba. The West helped keep Nelson Mandela in prison for 27 years, most of them on Devil's Island, Robben Island, in the dungeons of apartheid. The West supported racist apartheid rule in the very southern Africa they're now holding a summit in to tell Africans how important their democracy is. There's the picture of the hero Patrice Lumumba being led down the steps of that aircraft to his death, his dismemberment, and his dissolving in acid. You couldn't make it up. And they wonder why Africans are utterly unmoved at their pleas to reject China and Russia and embrace them instead. China never occupied a square inch of Africa. Russia never occupied a square inch of Africa. As a matter of fact, when the West was supporting apartheid and white supremacist rule in southern Africa, it was the Russians who were arming, financing, and providing the diplomatic skeleton, backbone for the worldwide activities of the anti-apartheid movement, of the movement for liberation in southern Africa. I have many times spoken at the Patrice Lumumba University for the Friendship of the Peoples. It's not in San Francisco, it's not in London, and it certainly isn't in Brussels. It's in Moscow, it's in Russia. I have been there, spoken there many times. Does that little vignette not explain something to you, the viewers, and the wider public about why the Africans will never hate Russia, will never hate China? China is building roads, railways, terminals, ports, harbors, infrastructure all over Africa. All the so-called West did was loot it and steal even the people of Africa themselves, chain them in the holds of ships, sailed them through the Middle Passage, tossing thousands of them overboard when they died as food for the sharks, and then those lucky enough to reach land were placed as beasts of burden in chains as slaves. You want Africans to support you, Mr. Biden, Mr. Sunak, Miss von der Leyen, Mr. Borrell, the people you just described as the people of the jungle while you sat in your garden. How does your garden grow now, Mr. Borrell? Have you seen the streets of France?
All through my 66 years of living as an African, born in Africa, it seems like everything African is inferior to everything Western. Everything that worked before they came, we dumped. And I just want you to hear the president of Rwanda in this next segment in an interview with a Western journalist, and how he basically told her that you don't set the standards for what morality is. You keep your morality. We in Africa can keep our morality. Listen.
You think you are the only ones who respect human rights, or others it's about violating human rights. No, we've fought for human rights and freedoms of our people much better and more than anyone, including you people who keep talking about this nonsense. Why don't you talk about your human rights and stop just where we have taken our country from and where it is now? Speaks for itself. The rest of the story just comes from this complex.
Is it not
so
a universal
you don't sit
right?
there. Yes, it is universal, but you don't sit there. If it is universal and you believe it, then you don't become the judge yourself. You don't start telling the others what to do, what they should not to do, or that what they are doing is not to your satisfaction. Who are you?
That's really the kind of stand Africans need to start taking with the West at every level, whether it's an African kid in elementary school, or in high school, or in college, or an African executive, or an African working in a place as an engineer. We take classes with them. We beat them in class. Then we come out of class, we get into these corporations, they become our bosses. Why? Now, I want you to listen to this Chinese, a leader at some capacity, talk about the relationship between China and Britain. The reason I'm playing this segment is that this is exactly how African leaders need to start talking to America and France and the European Union And all these people, when we negotiate with them, it's not about what they have today. It's about what Africa can be if we control our own resources. Because the reality is that if we control our own resources, it's a matter of time before they come crawling to buy at the market rate. Right now, they are taking at whatever they want to give us. And they are taking it to their place to develop their place and look down at us. Look down at the people whose natural resources is the reason New York City and Chicago and LA and London and Paris and Frankfurt and all those places are what they are. Listen to the Chinese really dress down Britain and more or less tell them that you are not at the Chinese level. When you talk to us, you should be happy we're talking to you. Listen to the Chinese guy.
Are you a competitor? Are you an ally? Are you a threat? How would you regard your relationship with Britain?
First of all, between China and Britain, from the Chinese perspective, Britain is not a rival, is not a competitor, it is not an enemy, is not an adversary. Britain is just an important country to get along with in peace and in friendship and for mutual benefit. Now, how Britain looks at China, it's up to the British government and people to decide. But I think it would be completely misguided for Britain to view China as an enemy or adversary or a competitor. What do China and Britain compete with? China is the largest manufacturer of automobiles. Competing with Britain? No. China is the largest exporter of EV cars and will lead the whole world in EV production. Is Britain a competitor? No. China will be the biggest and most important producer and R&D in terms of semiconductor in no time. Does that mean that China competes with Britain? No. China will be the leading nation in AI revolution. Is Britain a competitor? No. So I think British government should not overestimate its impact on the global scene and view Britain as a rival of China. China is not. China is a fact. China is a megatrend for Britain to live with and get along with. Let's make peace rather than agitating for war.
For over 60, almost 70 years, African countries, one by one, have been attaining their independence. Independence from colonialism to dependence on neo-colonialism. Our relationship with America and Britain, ultimately the European Union, and France inside the European Union, but separate from their colonial atrocities that they are committing in Africa. Our relationship has not been even-handed. The potential in Africa is boundless. But let's be honest about it. The boundless potential is limited if Africans don't learn how to work together, how to come together as one people. Cameroonians can't work separate from Nigerians. Ghanaians can't work separate from Kenyans. Tanzanians can now work separate from South Africans all through the continent. But most importantly, the biggest ace in the hole we have as Africans is that we have African brothers and sisters in diaspora. And I'm not talking about people like me who moved to America from Africa as an adult. I'm talking about our African American brothers and sisters. They have tested the waters. But most importantly, it's time for us to reach out to them and say to them, brothers and sisters, we made mistakes, but let's get together and correct our mistakes. Our brothers and sisters in America are yearning for the day we'll reach out to them and say, brothers and sisters, put our arms around them and say, whatever happened in the past, we wish it didn't happen, but we cannot wash away our blood. If we put our resources together with these brothers and sisters we have outside Africa, plus white people, liberal white people that understand the atrocities that their forefathers committed against Africa. I meet them every day in America. They are willing to work with us. In Igbo language, we say Igwewike. The masses, the more we are, the more powerful we are. We really have to stop being Nigerians and Ghanaians and Kenyans and Ugandans and South Africans and Sierra Leoneans and Guineans and start being Africans. I am not advocating discontinuing relationships with America or European Union or any of those, no. I'm advocating that it's time to return to the negotiating tables and negotiate on terms that work for Africa. All these organizations that America and Britain and France have introduced around the world, they are not working for Africa. The United Nations is not working for Africa. IMF is not working for Africa. World Bank is not working for Africa. NATO is not working for Africa. Then individually within the countries, the multinational corporations are not working for Africa. They are exploiting Africa. It's either time for them to renegotiate the terms with Africa, or Africans may have to look elsewhere and explore what China can do for Africa, what Russia can do for Africa, what India can do for Africa, and how the idea of BRICS as a bloc can work better for Africa. It's time for Africa to seriously think about open borders, not just overnight, but start coming together as countries and leaders of our countries to explore how we can open up the borders in Africa. Like you have 50 states in America. The different regions of America really didn't have much in common until they built a system that created dependence on each other and make them understand why they need to have their borders open. The European Union borders are open. Why do Nigerians need visas to go to Kenya? Why do Kenyans need visa to go to Cameroon? Why do Sierra Leoneans need? We need to open up our boundaries. And we need to think about a currency that is an African currency that can be used all over Africa and have less dependence on the dollar, the euro, and the pound. I'm not being radical here, guys. I'm just thinking outside the box. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is Fred Nwankwo coming to you from our studios in Chicago with another thought-provoking edition or episode of Bull Talk on Island TV. And until next time, good night and God bless.
I am alive today, Papa. It's by your grace. I woke up this morning. It's by your grace. Those people who have died today, I am no greater than them. Those people in the mortuary, I am no cooling than them. I am alive today, Baba. It's by your grace. I woke up this morning. It's by your grace. I am alive today, Baba.